Do you prefer Chicago deep dish style or a big slice of New York style pizza? It's an intense debate for some. Personally, I say let's just enjoy them both. Today I'm going to be making Emeril Lagasse's Chicago style deep dish pizza. Making pizza is so much fun, so please, if you've never had it or if you have it and you love it, let's make some deep dish pizza. First, we are going to start with our dough. You need 1.5 cups of warm water, which means 110 degrees Fahrenheit. To that, we are going to add a teaspoon of sugar and 1/4 ounce of active dry yeast, which is 1/2 tablespoon. Mix these together with a whisk until the sugar is dissolved. The sugar is going to eat the active dry yeast and begin fermentation. So let it sit for 5 minutes and you'll see it become nice and foamy. The recipe originally said to start your yeast, water, and sugar in a large bowl and then add the flour to that. I'm going to do it slightly differently by adding the water, sugar, and yeast into a big bowl that already has some of the flour in it. So start with 1.5 cups of flour. That's 1 cup. There's 1/2 cup. You also need 1/2 cup of something called semolina or semolina flour. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. It's a higher gluten flour typically seen in pastas. So 1/2 cup of that. And a teaspoon of salt. Then I'm going to create a small well in it, just using a wooden spoon to stir it first. Now we can mix in our yeast. And I'm going to start by stirring it with the wooden spoon. But we're going to keep adding flour to this and eventually start kneading it by hand. Slowly add in 2 cups of flour, 1/4 cup at a time. Working it together, I'm going to use a wooden spoon. Although the recipe says use your hands at this point, but I think it's just too sticky at this point. I'm going to add my remaining flour and then lightly flour a surface next to my dough. I just greased my hands, and now I'm going to begin to knead the dough together using my hands. And I'm going to turn it out onto the surface at this point. So just lightly begin kneading the dough. Make sure you keep the flour on it. And knead this dough for 3 to 5 minutes. Make sure you keep your hands greased. You want the dough to stay slightly sticky, but don't be afraid to sprinkle some flour on it. I've only kneaded the dough for about 3 minutes, maybe 4, just like the recipe said. Mine is still slightly sticky. Now in a large bowl you need 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil, roughly. Then you'll want to take your dough that's been slightly kneaded and is slightly sticky, put it in your oil, and turn it to cover. That way oil gets on everything. So as it rises, it's not going to stick to the pan. Now you can use plastic wrap, but I'm using a damp towel. So a towel I've been drying my hand on this whole time. You'll want to let this rise 1 hour to 1.5 hours or until doubled in a nice warm place. So I preheated my oven to 200, let it warm up for a few minutes, then shut it off, just so it's kind of warm. Now I'm putting my dough in there with the damp towel, so it's nice and covered, and I'm gonna let it rise. Now we can begin to prepare the ingredients for our sauce. You need 1 tablespoon of fresh chopped garlic. Not minced though, so don't go as tiny as minced. But take your garlic, hit it with the side of a blade, and that will get the skin off of it. use the bottom side of the blade to chop it. But we're not going to minced. I think minced is usually what you do with garlic. So just don't go super fine with it, but still relatively small. I would say that's about a tablespoon's worth of chopped garlic. Now you need 2 teaspoons worth of fresh chopped basil. So take your basil, roll it together slightly, and then just lightly chop it. Don't over chop it because you'll lose a lot of the fresh oils that way. There we go, 2 teaspoons of fresh chopped basil. All right. And you can't really roll oregano as well, but the same thing applies, the same rules. Just lightly chop it. Don't chop it too much or it'll lose a lot of its flavor. And we only need a teaspoon of the oregano. Take a medium saucepan and put it over a medium-high heat. Then add 2 tablespoons of olive oil and let them heat up. Let those tablespoons of olive oil heat up to medium-high. Once it is heated up, add your garlic, your tablespoon of chopped garlic, and fry it and stir it for 30 seconds. Then add your basil, stir that in, and your oregano. And stir those for 30 seconds. You also need 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. And make sure you stir that in as well. And 1/4 teaspoon of red pepper flakes. And 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And continuously stir all that as you go. 30 seconds. Very quickly for all this. Now we need to add 28 ounces of crushed tomatoes. And they typically come in a can. So put that in there and stir it. That's 1 can, 14 ounces. Now let's add our second can, making it 28 ounces. Earlier, when we were stirring around our herbs, you could have added 1/4 teaspoon of fennel seeds as well. I'm leaving them out because I'm not the biggest fan. At this point, you also want to add a teaspoon of sugar and a tablespoon of a dry red wine. And stir that in. And you're going to want to bring this to a boil. Now that this has reached a boil, turn your heat down to low and simmer this. Simmer this for 20 to 30 minutes. So I'm going to cover it and keep it at a low boil for 20 to 30 minutes. For this recipe, you also need a green bell pepper that has been cored and cut into rings. So I'm going to cut mine in half. And then just scoop out the middle part using a spoon. Alright, I've scooped out the centers. Now I'm just thinly slicing them into rings. Just very thinly. Alright, it's only been an hour, not an hour and a half, but my dough is pretty much doubled in size. So I'm just going to lightly punch it down and then just let it sit on a counter until I need it. You also need a yellow onion, and I just peeled one and cut it in half. Cut into thin rings. Like so. Now that the sauce is simmered for about 40 minutes, and I took the lid off so that it could really begin to thicken, you'll see now it's a little thicker, so just make sure you keep stirring it. Once you like the thickness it is at, remove it from heat and let it come completely to room temperature. Ideally for this recipe, you'd want a 12-inch Chicago-style pan. If you're like me, you don't have that. So the next best alternative is a springform pan. one you would use for a cake. And you need about half a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. Put it in and brush it around. You can also use pie pans. I'm using 2 other pie pans too. I'm making 3 individual pizzas. You will also want to preheat your oven to 475 degrees at this point. Now I'm taking my dough that has been divided into thirds. If you're using 2 12-inch pans, it will just be divided into 2 pieces for you. And slowly work on spreading the dough evenly. And we're actually only going to go 1.5 inches up on the sides. That's going to take a little bit of effort. And it's going to want to spring back to its normal shape. That's just how doughs are. You want about 1.5 inches up on the sides, and then let it rest for 5 minutes. The pizza crusts have been resting for 5 minutes. I'm going to try to bring my sides up a little bit more. But at this point, take your pound of mozzarella that has been sliced and layer it on the bottom. I bought mine pre-sliced. A lot of them do come that way. If you want to slice it yourself, go for it. On top of your mozzarella, put part of your ½ pound of pepperoni slices. What's nice about making multiple pizzas is that if someone doesn't like some things, you don't have to add it to their pizza. So this one's for me, I'm going to add all the ingredients. So now do your sliced mushrooms. And again, I bought them pre-sliced. They're a little thicker than I imagined, but not bad. Now spread your thin slices of green bell pepper. Then spread a lot of your onion. Now layer your sliced black olives, or kalamata in my case. Then spread your crumbled hot Italian sausage on top of that. Now ladle your room temperature sauce evenly over each one. And make sure you spread it evenly. Now spread your cup of grated Parmesan evenly all over all of your pizzas. So I'm doing 3, so I'm spreading 1/3 cup evenly over each of mine. Now just continue this process for each of your pizzas, including or not including whatever people prefer. All my pizzas are ready to go, so get them in your oven that's at 475 for 30 minutes or until the crusts begin to look golden brown. 30 minutes or golden brown. It's been 20 minutes and the tops of my pizzas are nice and golden brown. So pull them out and set them on your oven top. They smell great.
All right, Casey wanted me to give a real Chicago impression of the deep dish pizza. It's very good. Could use a little bit more sauce. The crust, I think I would bake it for a little bit more, but it is damn good. Very, very good. If you like this video and you want to learn about how to make other things, go ahead and subscribe to this channel.